And when one of the key manipulators, who I like to call the Wicked Witch of Wall Street, Blythe Masters, and her firm upper lip, your American English accent is quite appropriate, gets on MSNBC and says that there's no possible way that the gold and silver markets can be manipulated because we act at JP Morgan on the strict advice of our clients. Well, that is on its face true if your key client is the Federal Reserve. Because the Federal Reserve acts as a front for its shareholders, which are the big banks. So the relationship is inseparable. It's just a front. And when a trader, I think his name is Alicia Rastani, his last name is Rastani, gets on BBC, and he point blank says, look, governments don't run the world. Banks run the world. The BBC announcers just literally pause and they go, I don't know what to say. And they say, well, it's literally true. It's literally true because the healthcare plan is not about healthcare. The carbon tax is not about carbon dioxide. It's just all about money going to corporations. That's all it is. If you want a picture of it, just think of the all-seeing eye above a pyramid. Okay? The eye is the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is the central bank of America and acts as other nations' central banks, believe it or not, because it literally has given other nations billions of, I take that back, trillions with a T, of dollars from the American taxpayer, which they haven't earned yet, and has used that to prop up the world's financial system. So below the eye of the pyramid, which is the Federal Reserve, you've got the unholy trinity, which I call the European Central Bank and the International Monetary Fund and the Bank for International Settlements, and they all have a particular function. At the top or above the all-seeing eye, the Federal Reserve, you've got corporations. In other words, the banks prop up the corporations. And at the bottom left corner, you've got the enforcement arm, which is the United States military and NATO. And on the bottom right corner of this truncated all-seeing eye pyramid, you've got the propaganda arm, which is the media, which is what we've been focusing on tonight. So the whole system is one giant matrix. And you can see how the system works if you're willing to see the matrix for what it is. And most people, like I keep hammering tonight, can't see it because they can't divorce themselves from the propaganda they've been hearing all their lives. It's actually too violent a transition for them.
So I guess what you're saying is even though Glenn Beck's not on Fox News and is doing his own thing, we can't trust him?
Glenn Beck is a Mormon and a Mason.
Oh, he's a Mason too? I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. Just go to Google Images when we're done and type in Glenn Beck Mason sweater.
I knew he was Mormon, and I obviously was being facetious there.
Yes, and people should know, and again, for the Mormon people who are going to listen to this, I'm not attacking you personally. You should know that Brigham Young was a Mason, and Joseph Smith was a Mason. And that the ceremonies that are done at an elite level within Mormonism are identical to Freemasonry. And that at the core of Masonic theology is Mormon theology. And I said that in that order for that reason, because it's inseparable. Because when you get up at the high levels, when the Mormon Bible starts talking about Jesus and Lucifer being brothers, Well, you've just lost all connection to Christianity. So what you've got is a thin veneer, and I do mean thin veneer, of Christianity over what appears to be a Christian denomination, but which is in actual fact just another branch of Freemasonry. And the best thing you can do with Mormonism is to leave it.
Yep. So after this whole conversation, you've been talking about all kinds of stuff relating to what did you call the it wasn't an oligarchy but an oligopoly.
Yes.
What would you call the United States? I mean, is it fascist or is it an oligarchy, or what exactly is it?
It is a synthetic totalitarian state masquerading as a democracy which has its roots in occult ideology. How's that?
That is a sobering statement, Leonard.
That's right, because remember what I said in Volume 1. I said problem, reaction, solution, thesis, antithesis, synthesis. It doesn't matter whether it's communist or fascist. It's just the two wings on the same bird of prey. You're going to have the good cop battling the bad cop, but the fact is those cops are too compromised in different ways, are both compromised in different ways.
Yeah. On the I was going to cover two little things here real quick. With Freemasonry, there's the Scottish Rite and the York Rite. Now, I was listening to this interview from a while ago that Bill Cooper did with a 32-degree Mason, I believe. And it was interesting because in the last interview we did with you, we talked a little bit about that birth certificate and stuff like that. Obviously, we didn't touch greatly on all that. But with what comes along with the birth certificate and the Social Security card and number and all of that, it was really interesting to hear this interview because he basically broke it down like this. What he said was that the Scottish Rite enables you to travel and go just to different countries and do things in that way with whatever, work that if you get up to that, you work your way that high up, which is interesting because I did pass to you a testimony of a member of our church who left Freemasonry and was actually a 33-degree Mason. Interesting enough is that he traveled all over the place. I mean, country to country to country. I just found that interesting. Then the other part where he broke down the York Rite, he talked about when you're a member of the York Rite, statute, law, and policies no longer apply to you. And I thought that was so interesting. If you relate that to what we're talking about, the Constitution, like, the people that are a part of the free, quote unquote free man movement, and you know what I'm saying, all of that stuff, which is hard to prove, but it really does kind of come full circle there.
Well, one of the things I hammered home in our first conversation is that if you want to understand the occult and how it works, you must do what first?
Read the Bible.
Understand the Bible.
You got it. Because Satan is the great imitator. He twists, he sullies, he modifies God's plan for the world. So on the surface, you've got the York Rite and the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, which is highly analogous to Christian church history in that you've got Catholicism and Protestantism. And each has its own areas of focus. Each has its advantages and disadvantages. The advantages of Catholicism is that you've got consistent doctrine. Now, I as a Protestant have great issue with a lot of Catholic theology. But one thing you got to admit, they're pretty consistent. Okay? And that, of course, reveals the disadvantages of Protestantism in that you've got hundreds of denominations. But outside of the umbrella of Freemasonry, You've got hundreds of denominations of the occult. You've got Bohemian Grove, Skull and Bones, Scroll and Key. I could go on, and I just outlined it in volume 1. And those are just like the top 20 or so. And one of the criticisms is of volume 1 is, you didn't talk about this secret society. You didn't talk about that's a secret society. And I say, look, buddy, it's already 2.5 hours long. You want a 10-hour version?
Some people do.
Well, yeah,
just saying.
I mean, we would watch it, but
I'm sure you would. And it would be the death of me.
Yes, yeah, but I just wanted to squeeze a few things in just before we part ways here. I know that Daniel, in the last conversation, we were talking about Kent Hovind, and I know he wanted to disclaim what he had said, even though we didn't go back and look at it.
I did. I went back and looked it up. In the last one we were talking about, the supposed overpopulation of the Earth. I said that I quoted Hovind as saying that you could fit everyone in the city of Tallahassee with a 3-foot radius. I was incorrect. It's actually Jacksonville, Florida, because Jacksonville, the city, is also a county. I mean, still, the quote holds, but I just wanted to correct the information for the listeners. So, you don't requote it as Tallahassee, because that is incorrect.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because any researcher doesn't have to be 100% correct 100% of the time. You're going to make mistakes. I made mistakes in volume 1. But any researcher worth his or her salt will acknowledge any incorrect information. Okay, and that's one thing you do not see on the TV news.
Right. And that's actually what Chris White said today. He just was talking about that on his Debunking Aliens. He's like, I'm sure there's something in there that I missed. But, when it comes up, we'll tackle it,
That was Canary Cry, right?
Yeah, it was Canary Cry. Yeah, that's an old episode. One other thing. Oh, yeah. On to the Hovind. Daniel called Creation Today months ago. Yeah,
about, I think it was August, 3 months ago now, probably.
Yeah.
About that.
Just tell us really quick.
Oh, I thought we had touched on this. Maybe I'm forgetting. I had called Creation Today, Leonard, because I'm going to be taking Kent Hovind's Creation College courses this spring, and going through that. I think that's a great avenue to share the gospel. But when I called them, I also had some questions about the Freeman movement, the redemption of the Social Security number, the straw man, all of that. And when I called them up, the woman on the other end of the phone, she said, we're not allowed to talk about that. Our phone calls are highly monitored by the IRS. Creation Today is a 501c3 corporation now. What ended up happening is his son Eric took over Creation Science Evangelism, but the IRS was coming after them so harshly that what Eric did is he created a separate corporation. Creation Science Evangelism was not a corporation. He created a corporation, Creation Today, and bought Creation Science Evangelism and incorporated it. And now he's restricted from talking about a whole bunch of the UCC, the UCC, all that. However, though, also he has had to edit extreme parts of Hovind's Seminar 5 on the New World Order. They've just cut whole sections out of it that they won't allow them to show or let them distribute any of that material on.
Well, that is quite sad to hear. Again, I'm not going to even entertain the notion that somehow Ken Hovind and his son are quote unquote on the inside.
No,
I would interpret the information that you've given me to mean that a compromise has been forced on the Hovind family by the IRS.
Let me add on to that. I didn't want to portray that they were on the inside track and all that. Not at all. What I think happened is in order for the ministry to continue, the only viable option Eric had was to create a corporation. I am convinced that he knows, he knows what's going on because of his dad. But in order for the sake of continuing to share the gospel, he had to do something quickly. I think that's what happened.
I would concur with that analysis. Again, we don't see demons where they don't exist.
Exactly.
Right.